Ladies and gentlemen, I now ask Linda Bash, President of the National Council for Research on Women and a former Selection Committee advisory member, to introduce the moderator for today's panel discussion, Sexual and Reproductive Rights as Women's Human Rights. Linda?
Thank you, Pat, and good morning, everyone. What an honor to be with you all at such an early hour. And I'm very grateful to Peter and Pat Gruber for inviting me to be involved with the Women's Rights Prize today. It has been so rewarding to have served on their advisory board and to get to know so many inspiring awardees and leaders over the years. Like the Gruber Foundation, the National Council for Research on Women, a 120-member center network, strives to advance the rights and opportunities for women and girls nationally and globally. Today, I'm so pleased to introduce my friend and dear colleague, Carol Jenkins, former president of the Women's Media Center, which we're proud is a member center of the Council, actually. Carol is a writer, producer, and Emmy Award-winning broadcaster. Carol enjoyed a distinguished career in television news, including 23 years at WNBC TV here in New York, where she co-anchored the 6 p.m. newscast. She also hosted her own daily talk show, Carol Jenkins Live, on WNYW TV. Carol is one of the greatest MC moderators of all times. Every event in which Carol has been involved, whether a panel of experts or one-on-one interviews, has been masterfully led with her unsurpassed insight and sparkle. She's a newswoman through and through. She brings intelligence, focus, and even an irreverent sense of humor, which I hope we'll hear a bit of today, which adds both lightness and a reality check to the many gatherings of thought leaders she is asked to moderate. She continues to bring her energy to women's and girls' rights and now chairs the board of the African Medical Research Foundation, known as AMRAF, the largest health organization operating in Africa. It's my delight and great privilege to introduce Carol Jenkins. Thank you. And I'm so sorry, a really big congratulations to the awardees today for your heroic work. Wonderful.
Good morning, and it's not so early anymore, you know. I mean, but you all were here, and we are thrilled that you are. I just want to say, first of all, thank you to Linda Bash, who is a terrific friend and an inspiration. She really is a great woman leader. A great leader of women and some men. And so thank you very much for that introduction. And I want to say how much I respect, what admiration I have for Patricia Gruber. What you have done over these years has just been extraordinary. And I hope you understand that this kind of generosity, this impact that you make, is unusual and really should be acclaimed, because it's just a gorgeous, terrific, dynamic gift to women and some of the men to whom you give the prizes as well. So we thank you so much for your contribution. We're joined by Lola Salas, who will be doing some interpreting for us. And next year, I promised that we would all be fluent in Spanish, so we wouldn't have to do that. I want to begin this conversation because I don't know how many of you have been engaged in the Millennium Development Goals and what's going on at the United Nations, other than your traffic has been eternally snarled. But I've been sitting in on some of the meetings in my role as chair of AMREF, looking at what we expect to have happen in 2015, the distance that we have to travel. So I wanted to ask our honorees today what they feel about it. And the question that I ask is, if you, at the end of this week's conversations, received a gift. It's in a box. It's got a bow on it. What would it look like for your organization and for the work that you do?
Well, I think in connection with the Millennium Development Goals, I guess the gift we would like in the box to help move those goals to reality would be to have human rights incorporated in the approaches that are taken to meeting the important targets on reducing maternal mortality and having universal access to reproductive health. The goals are important. Obviously, it's the end game of what we do our work for. But I think what's often been missing in approaching those goals is understanding how critical it is to have human rights accountability in place. There are many places, and one of the places where we work is in India, in which there are actually good policies on the books about how to address reducing maternal mortality, and India leads the world in preventable maternal deaths. But those policies aren't implemented. And part of human rights accountability is making sure that governments, in fact, live up to what's written on the books. So we would like to see in that box human rights integrated into the approach to the Millennium Development Goals.
Are you optimistic that we make any progress this week? 5 years to go.
I'm always
Or as I heard someone phrase it recently, evidence-based hope. Is that the way you phrase that? Norma, and in terms of the Millennium Development Goals and your work, are you optimistic that any progress will be made this week at the United Nations?
Sí. Creo que estoy muy optimista porque una gran mujer va a estar representando nuestros intereses.
I think I'm very optimistic because a great woman is representing our interests.
Para nosotras, la señora Bachelet representa una real posibilidad de no solamente tener conocimiento, sino sensibilidad suficiente para luchar por nosotras.
And feelings to help all of us.
And how do you what are you looking for in terms of your work? What would make the difference to the work that you do on the ground every day?
Creo que la diferencia la haría el que las leyes cambiasen para dar herramientas a las mujeres para reclamar sus derechos.
The difference would be that if the laws change, so the tools would be in place for the women to change their rights.
Que los estados tradujesen esas leyes a políticas públicas.
That the states, governments would translate this to public policies.
Y que la sociedad en su conjunto
And that society together
fuese capaz de admitir
would be able to accept
que los varones y las mujeres
that women and men
tenemos la misma dignidad
we have the same dignity
y los mismos derechos.
and the same rights.
And now when you talk about making governments accountable, and you both have done it, how is that done? And I know that you've got one of the things that I love about the work that you do is that you train lawyers as well. You're in the law schools and you have them coming up so that they understand the new law and can really, take it on. But talk to us about, without these advances at the United Nations, how so far you've made governments adhere to your expectations.
All right, well, why don't I give an example that takes us far from the UN and back down to the ground, actually at the state level in India. So as I said before, huge issue with preventable maternal deaths in India. And about 7 years ago, we began working with our partners there, who are the Human Rights Law Network, on addressing in the courts, using the court strategy to address the government's failure to follow its own policies on preventing maternal deaths. So working with them, we worked on a series of cases, and one that we advised on just came out 3 months ago from the New Delhi High Court. And at the center of that case was two women, one who ended up dying in connection with her 6th pregnancy, and the other who gave birth unassisted under a tree in Delhi. And in both cases, there were policies on the books about both admission to hospitals without having to pay fees, about nutritional support during pregnancy, all really terrific policies that have been shown to be effective in reducing maternal mortality. And yet, they were just willfully failed to follow. So, for example, the woman who ended up dying in connection with her sixth pregnancy, during her fifth pregnancy, went from hospital to hospital. She had fetal demise, and no one would admit her and treat her. And what the New Delhi High Court said in its decision in June was the government has to make these policies real. And it's got to come back to court with a plan for how to do that. So that is a very concrete example, close to the ground at the state level, and where the government is going to have to live up to its obligation. And sometimes people say, well, litigation, isn't that really sort of contentious with the government? But these are commitments in this case that the Indian government has already made. So it's a way to say make those commitments to women and preventing their deaths real. So it's really just holding the government up to what it's already agreed to do.
Yeah, I was reading last night your quite extensive report on Kenya in the Kibera, as you describe it, and I appreciate that settlement as opposed to what most people call it as the slum. But in Kibera, you have been doing some really intensive work there. Talk to us about the new constitution there, because you seem to be optimistic that this is going to hold good news for women in Kenya.
Well, the Center just did a report on unsafe abortion in Kenya, which has been a huge issue. And one of the issues has been how indeterminate it is what the law actually allows for. And the new constitution, abortion became a very contentious issue in the middle of that constitution. And it went back and forth between the political actors and the technical experts who were drafting the constitution. And at one point, the political actors put into the Constitution protecting life from the moment of conception, which would make, obviously, the embryo equivalent to a fully developed human being. And the technical experts put in an exception to make sure that there was abortion in the case of the life and health of the woman. So these two things are now living, together in the new Kenyan Constitution. But the reality is that provision that says that abortion must be accessible for the life and health of women will provide a legal wedge to work towards a day when Kenyan women can get access for their health and lives to safe abortion, because the deaths from unsafe abortion are tragic in Kenya and need to be addressed. So there is some room there for further legal development.
And you're opening an office in Nairobi.
We are opening an office in Nairobi in November.
Okay, excellent. Norma, I want to explore some additionally about Michelle Bachelet, who's just been appointed the head of, I guess they're calling it UN Women. It's got a much more complicated title than that. Talk to us a little bit about what you expect she will bring, a Latina woman, to these issues of women's rights as human rights.
Bueno, yo espero que la señora Bachelet se sienta orgullosa.
I hope that Mrs. Bachelet will be very proud.
Cuando quiero o creo que las feministas queremos que pueda emular con la señora Cecilia Quiroga.
That if she can emulate Miss Cecilia Quiroga.
Esperamos que la señora Bachelet, que es conocedora de la situación que vivimos las mujeres en América en general, pero sobre todo en América Latina,
Mrs. Bachelet is very knowledgeable about the situation that women in America and in America in general live.
contribuya a sensibilizar a los dirigentes de Naciones Unidas y de los gobiernos en general.
She can contribute to the sensitization of the governments and the staff of the UN in general.
Para que consideren que los estados deben privilegiar los derechos de las personas por encima de los intereses de algunas instituciones.
The states have to consider and prioritize
Priorizar los intereses de las
the interest of
personas,
the people
de la ciudadanía,
and the citizens
por encima de los intereses de algunas instituciones, por respetables y antiguas que sean.
above the institution's interest.
There are some who criticized her in Chile for not pursuing a very aggressive reproductive rights agenda in her own country. Do you feel that she is on the positive side of this issue?
Es verdad, las compañeras chilenas tuvieron que dar una dura lucha en todo aquello que tiene que ver con la anticoncepción de emergencia.
Yes, it is true. In Chile, the compañeras, they had to get a very difficult moment in the reproductive rights in emergency. No? Yes.
O la llamada píldora del día después.
And talking about the after the next day pill.
Lo que eso representaba para la vida de las mujeres, para su salud y para su capacidad de decidir sobre su vida,
This represented something very important in decision making of their own lives.
pareció no tener un gran peso en ese momento para el gobierno chileno,
Seemed that it was not enough for the government in Chile
dirigido por la señora Bachelet.
when she was in charge.
Pero creemos que ahora, investida de un gran poder,
But we now think that she has a powerful position.
ponga en ejercicio el mandato que le daremos las
She
mujeres
will use the mandate that the women will give her
de todo el mundo
of all the world,
y de manera especial las de América Latina, las que
especially
ella conoce tanto,
the Latin American women that she knows very well,
para que defienda nuestros intereses
so she can defend our interests
con la fuerza que otras mujeres chilenas
with the strength that other Chilean women
lo han hecho en la Corte Interamericana
has been doing it in the Inter-American Court
o en los espacios diferentes de Naciones Unidas
or
y
in
de la OEA,
or in different places in the United Nations, in the OAS,
donde han luchado a brazo partido por hacer realidad los derechos humanos de las mujeres.
where they have been fighting very hard to make this a reality.